Welcome to the F-It Bucket, a podcast exploring the realms of cybersecurity and our daily human interactions with digital innovations. I'm Alex Gallegos. I'm a systems administrator.
Ashley Keski, cybersecurity specialist.
I'm Paul Ruffalo, a cybersecurity consultant and faculty member.
And this is our 6th episode, and I don't know. I don't even want to talk about cybersecurity anymore. I was all ready to record an episode. We have a couple of news stories. We have, I think, a pretty interesting topic. Hopefully you'll think it's an interesting topic by the end of the episode too. And then right before we started recording, Paul said, I started messing around with AI image generation, and you should see what DALL-E 3 produced. And then through just the most horrific image I've ever seen in my entire life into the Discord chat and just dropped it in like it was going to be fine. And Paul, do you want to describe this hideous abomination against humanity and nature that AI has created at your behest?
Yeah, so May the 4th is coming soon, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a fresh image of Princess Leia in Jabba's palace wearing her infamous bikini?
Yeah, we're all nerds. We get it.
Unfortunately, DALL-E doesn't allow you to use bikini as a prompt, and so I did my best to work around that, and what ended up being created was Jabba the Hutt wearing Princess Leia's white robes from episode 4.
6.
No, he is wearing.
Oh,
her robes
yeah.
from episode
Sorry,
4.
yes, the robes from 4. Yeah, I'm with you.
And he is sitting on his throne, and on top of the robes are the infamous bikini. We will share the link on the website, and maybe have a bucket ready because I did throw up when I saw it.
Yeah. This, the name of the podcast is the F-It Bucket, and if anything qualifies, it's this thing that I'm looking at. You described it to me, and I asked you to send it to me. So I feel like I am responsible in some capacity for my own discomfort, but I didn't expect him to have the buns.
Well,
that's like when you told me it was Jabba the Hutt, I was like, I know what Jabba the Hutt looks like. And Jabba the Hutt's, I'm going to say, main distinguishing feature, other than being a giant slug, is an extreme lack of hair. And you know what doesn't improve Jabba the Hutt's face?
Hair,
yeah. Yeah, it's hair. Hair doesn't help. It's not good. My life was not enriched.
It's also, I feel like there's a little bit of Boss Nass in the image too.
A little bit, and a little bit of Padme Amidala's collar action going on.
But
like
it's
get really high.
You got to get that 80s collar pop in there.
Yeah. It's
So this may be a new feature. Each week we will feature a new image on DALL-E that we have begrudgingly created week to week. They might get better.
The bar's pretty low right now. Whew. Okay. So I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about security and shit? I wasn't prepared for the emotional toll this was going to take on me. Immediately at the beginning of the episode.
Well, why don't we talk about what unfounded pledges that we want?
Yes.
That CIS is trying to have people do?
Yes. So this is one of the stories that I picked up on. Wow. So the Biden administration, this is a story from Wired, the Biden administration is asking the world's largest technology companies to publicly commit to tightening the digital security of their software and cloud services. That is an opening paragraph. It's directly from the Wired story. It sounds great. I'm excited about it. It makes me happy. And then immediately they take the wind out of my sails with the next sentence when they say it's a voluntary pledge. Awesome. Because if there's one thing that large profit-driven corporations are known for, it's doing things voluntarily so that they can spend more money on a department that is typically seen as a cost center by executives, just, for the general good of humanity as a whole. That's a thing that corporations are really good at. So I don't know why I'm so cynical about this.
I was just reading through part of the article, and these are critical security improvements. And making a voluntary pledge to enable MFA just seems crazy. Like that's at a minimum that should be enforced.
Mm-hmm. Multi-factor authentication, eliminating default passwords, and making it easier for customers to understand when hacks of products occur that they use. So basically, like, basic entry-level cybersecurity stuff that should be there and arguably should be regulated, as far as I'm concerned. And so we want to make it voluntary. We want to make it like just a pledge that people can sign to make people feel good. I don't know about both of you. I signed a pledge back in 5th grade that I would never drink any alcohol ever. And I didn't do it. And not only did I not do it, I didn't do it a lot. Like
Wait,
I missed
this was
the
middle
mark.
school?
Elementary school.
So you drank before middle school, though.
No, but I mean, they like asked me to commit to like lifelong, be like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna swear that off forever, and then I got a little bit older, and it was like, oh, but it turns out tequila is delicious, and they didn't tell me that tequila was going to be delicious when I went through the DARE program. They just said, if you have one beer, you're going to be homeless and your life is going to be ruined, and it was like, well, I don't think I want that, but yeah.
Yeah, that voluntary pledge went out the window in my early 20s.
Yeah, same. For legal purposes, not a second before our early 20s. But...
Exactly.
So there's a paragraph in here that is confusing.
Mm-hmm.
CISA says they have 50 companies that are signing, and then the end of the paragraph, someone says, I don't know any company that has signed. So... do we take that as this is just a farce and it's an article and
some clickbait?
Yeah. Well, I like that notably they reached out to some of the tech giants like Amazon and Google, and they had absolutely no plans. Well, sorry, I can't say that whether they had plans or not. They refused to say whether they were going to sign or not.
How'd you like to be the CISA representative floating that over? Hey, you guys want to sign this? Huh? Please?
Mm-hmm.
We need your backing.
We should say CISA, for anybody that's not sure, is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security. Just because I know we promised not to use acronyms that people didn't know what they were. It's a pretty valuable resource for anybody in a cybersecurity role to kind of look to for what some of the best practices and guidelines are for what they should be doing, as well as a really good trusted resource for when there's been a major cybersecurity incident or breach. They're typically one of the first ones out there to notify people that that's been the case.
So I think the picture they selected for the article is telling. Because if you look at that woman's face, it's kind of like, would you please sign this? Like,
yeah,
we really want your support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was not overly enthusiastic with this particular piece of news when it came out of Capitol Hill.
But wait, Alex, are you ever thrilled with news out of Capitol Hill?
Well, that's a good segue. Speaking of performative bullshit that means nothing and helps no one, fair and balanced news from the F-it bucket here. No opinions or editorializing. So there was also a series of congressional hearings this week for UnitedHealth, specifically the CEO, who had answered a bunch of questions in a congressional hearing about the UnitedHealth hack that occurred. And okay, maybe talk me down from this one if you two have a different opinion. Because on the one hand, some of the questions that they asked were correct, and they were questions that should have been asked. Like, how did you miss basic things like two-factor authentication, right? That's absolutely right, that it's the sort of question that somebody should ask after a cybersecurity incident, in
because
my
they didn't
opinion.
sign the voluntary pledge.
Oh, right, of course. Oh, it all makes sense. But when
the damn Sokovia Accords, son of a...
Right. Yeah. Captain America was right at this whole time. Whenever I look at a congressional hearing, not this congressional hearing, any congressional hearing, my immediate first thought is that the reason this congressional hearing is happening is so that a bunch of politicians on either side of the aisle can put in their campaign ads for re-election next time. Senator so-and-so is tough on cybersecurity or tough on environmentalism or whatever else the issue is. They can have a quote show up in, say, the Washington Post, whose article we're going to link in the show notes because that's the article we're discussing. Maybe they'll get their face on the TV or they'll get a photo op, and that's what the congressional hearing is about. There aren't actual consequences to a congressional hearing. Like, for people like you and I, if we're called in to official courtroom proceedings, it's because something bad has happened, and if we're found to be negligent, something worse is going to happen afterward. But this, my view, and maybe this makes me a bad civics student, maybe this makes me a bad citizen. I am open to criticism both from the other members of the panel and from anybody that wants to write in and tell me I might be mistaken. My view is that this is all performative bullshit for lawmakers and politicians to stand up and bluster and blow hot air for a couple of days that will amount to nothing, will not matter in the long run, will result in no change, and does not ultimately transfer any responsibility, accountability, and will not make anyone answer for anything, change their behavior, or implement any more stringent security standards at UnitedHealthcare or at any other company anywhere ever. Also, I think after that rant, I must be an anarchist now. I don't know, but...
I think until something is really hit home financially for them, nothing will change.
Agreed.
I guess I'll call it silver lining, at least from the article at the very end, there's a couple of X posts, formerly Twitter, that talk about the Congressman Whitty, who's the CEO of said company, and then Republican Buddy Carter. And he's saying, I am vowing to bust up your company. And as part of that, he has a diagram behind him that shows all of the holdings. And he's saying, explain how your company can justify these conflicts of interest. So they're a public entity, correct? UnitedHealthcare?
To the best of my knowledge, yes,
or
they are.
At least they have holdings that are. So you would hope that, our government is leaning in and saying, okay, you owe this to the people to be protecting, their rights, their PHI. It is protected, right? And you didn't do right by them. And just woefully offering interest-free loans and identity protection is not enough. I mean, I would hope that in the coming weeks they basically get this guy out and say, look, you should never run a company again, at least public.
Yeah.
Because as we were preparing for this, you look at entities like this, and the right way to do it, right, is that the executives have say. They are ultimately accountable, but they, delegate to the experts. But then the board is also accountable, right? And if at any point either one of those groups, one or both, if they knowingly don't push down the appropriate protections, it's gross negligence on their parts, and none of them deserve to be in those seats.
Absolutely. We could even talk about SolarWinds and how that's all unfolding.
Oh,
And LastPass.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, again, it's one of those classic cases of it's not if, it's when, and then how you handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Target. They were one of the most infamous breaches ever, and it doesn't seem like we give a shit anymore.
Right.
They're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And it was a third party, but same time, it's all in how you handle the event.
Yeah. Masterclasses in how not to handle this kind of event.
That's what's telling too is that they paid the ransom. It's like, really? You are a healthcare organization and you don't have the appropriate immutable backups and other things in place to allow you to really never even be down. And you got handcuffed to the point where you have to pay ransom to bring yourself back up. That's just disgusting.
Yeah. Now, this is an issue. I don't remember if we've talked about this on the podcast specifically before. I've wrestled at least in my own sleepless nights with the question of whether to, obviously from our idealistic standpoint, we would say, obviously, you never pay the ransom. And then there's kind of that next level down where it's one thing to say, I have my backups in order. I restore from my backups if I ever have an incident. They're immutable. They're separate from my main systems. They aren't controlled with my single sign-on, so there shouldn't be a path to my backup systems from my primary systems, even if my credentials are compromised, which would be the ideal. There's question in my mind, not really question, because I know that the right answer is still not to pay the ransom. It's a lot harder to advise somebody that can get all their own data back and isn't really concerned about whether their files are encrypted or not, but is facing an attacker that's saying, pay me X amount of money or I'm going to publicly disclose X number of records, this many people's PII, PHI, and I'm just going to put it on the dark web for anybody that wants to download it unencrypted. And I understand where it's tempting from the respondent's standpoint as they sit there in the boardroom to say, is it worth that amount of money in order to prevent potentially millions of customers' data from being published unencrypted in a repository out on the dark web? I would argue that the answer is still no, and it's really hard to say no when you have a gun to your head that has nothing to do with the integrity of your backups, but rather the publication of the data. But not only is there no indication, you're dealing with criminals. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee that they won't just release the data anyway. And even if they do, the statistics tell us that if you pay the ransom, the odds are very good either that you will suffer another cybersecurity incident in a very short amount of time because criminals talk to each other. It's like, these are the exploits I used. This is how I got in. This is how much money I made. And they're willing to pay in order to prevent their data from being published. Or there's nothing to stop them from just coming back a year from now and saying, hey, you remember all that data I downloaded from you that's been sitting in my desk drawer on a portable hard drive? I've decided that what I could really use is some more money in order to keep me from publishing it out on the internet. And really, there's nothing to prevent those scenarios from happening.
There's not. Double extortion it's a pain.
Yeah. And it's very difficult, I know, to take that on board and just decide that you will never, ever pay the ransom. And I realize that. And I realize it's easy for me to say as like, hey, I don't own the business. I'm not going down for the decisions that were made. You know, I just sit in my cubicle and I click buttons and I send things up the chain of command and then I do what comes back down. And so it's very easy from my perspective inside a company and my perspective outside a company looking in and being an armchair quarterback and saying, oh, you didn't do this cyber event properly, to say never to pay the ransom. But nonetheless, in my heart of hearts, never pay the ransom. Never, never.
I think another pivot on this is anyone in Congress actually qualified to go through this level of questioning?
No.
Like, do we have confidence in their abilities?
No, absolutely not. No. A elected member of Congress once stood up in front of his peers and described the internet as not a big truck that you can just put things on.
Yeah. I mean, I look at that and I remember, I probably said this before, but there was a day of cyber that I went to. It was probably 15 years ago now. And it was taught by a former FBI agent. And he was just kind of going through the basics of, forensics and things that he has done. And there were kind of two things that I took away from that. It was just one day. It wasn't hands-on. It was just more of a talk. One is if you think your machine has been compromised, unplug it. Don't shut it down, unplug it. Mm-hmm. And the second one...
From the network, not power.
No, power. Because even if you do unplug it, it doesn't have the opportunity to write and close the files.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm with you.
And the other thing that was more telling was if you think you know what you don't know, you're a liability. If you know what you don't know, you're an asset. Mm. And I look at our Congress members and I feel like more often than not, when it gets into this space, they act like they know what's going on, but it almost becomes an SNL skit without a script. And it's really sad. It's like I think at that level they need to admit what they don't know, but admit what they need to be doing for the citizens and have experts conduct those hearings.
Yeah, they need some sort of special committee with the expertise on that committee to advise them.
And they almost owe it to us anyway, too, with all the things that they're producing now, with, the Biden administration's call to arms and all the legislations and things saying, even the pledge, even though it's kind of valueless, it's at least a good idea. But they're spending a good amount of time trying to level up capabilities, but they just have to admit when they're, in the wrong sandbox and have someone else come in and be there and do it right.
Yeah. A thing politicians are notoriously really good at is admitting, I'm in over my head. This is not a thing that's my area of expertise, and I need expert advice because I don't know what I'm doing for sure, and I don't understand what I'm talking about. Do you remember when Rudy Giuliani fired off a tweet where he accidentally made a link in the tweet, and then he said somebody hacked his Twitter?
Nice use of the word hack.
Yeah, he said something happened just as the president left for G20 in July. In July, he indicted the Russians who will never come here, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what the tweet is. I'm not going to read the whole thing because fuck Rudy Giuliani. But the point is, he put G-20.in, and because .in is a top-level domain, that just became a link in like any browser ever that's been programmed in like the last 15 years. And then he immediately replied to his own tweet, and he said, Twitter allowed someone to invade my text with a disgusting anti-president message. The same thing, period, no space, occurred later, and it didn't happen. No, it didn't. Don't tell me they are not committed card-carrying anti-Trumpers. Time magazine also may fit that description. Fairness, please. It's like, no, you fucking idiot.
So Alex had special Cheerios today. Someone might have peed in them.
My special Cheerios are a complete lack of trust in the United States government and a special dollop of disdain for the GOP that has only grown and festered since 2016. It's only episode, 6, 7? And I figure I may as well alienate that half of the audience early. Like, if you're going to show up, like, I'm not necessarily interested in your patronage. So
this is where we're at.
Yeah, I may as well drive them off early. All right, let's move on to our main topic that we wanted to discuss. This is... Actually, I'm going to pick on you because I think you said this is a topic that came up during a meetup that you were at not too long ago.
Yes, over the weekend I sat in on a 3-day boot camp for the CISM certification, the Certified Information Security Manager.
Nice.
And we were talking about policies, and the topic of phishing came up, and training, and how can we educate users, but also how can we, as security engineers or analysts, protect the network and not put that responsibility on end users. There's obviously email filtering that we could use, but outside of that, kind of the thing that was brought up was gamifying reporting phishing emails, or having one person solely be responsible for training and hosting that quarterly.
Ooh, I like that.
And just having that constant pressure.
And I think when you kind of pitched the topic amongst the three of us, it was what could we do other than training? Because I think the primary focus has kind of been train your end users, train your staff, train. When you're not training, do phishing tests on your staff, which is basically just training with a different word around it, I think. But I think there's a lot that you can do before messages get to staff, and there's a lot you can do afterward, and which is why we all thought it was like, oh, I think this is a pretty good topic that we could dive into quite a bit. So I think what makes sense to me anyway is to kind of break this up into, let's just follow the email life cycle from the time a message comes in to our mail server to the time that we finish up with a potential incident, and kind of track through the whole time that we kind of have control of that email. So first and foremost, I would say, like you said, what can we do before the message ever gets in front of the user and stop people from even seeing the messages? Like you said, email filtering, pretty good. I think if you're not using some sort of email filtering tool these days, you're asking for trouble. I remember even when I started my career 15 years ago, and email filtering was nowhere near as robust as it is now, we accidentally let our license lapse for like not even 8 hours. And those 8 hours that we were without bulk mail protection were just insane. I think every single person got over 1,000 emails just during that 4-hour period. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like, yeah, this is what we're filtering you against.
Mm-hmm.
Something like 10% of the emails that your average mail server receives are legitimate messages that you would want end users to see.
I mean, there's technical controls you can put in place too with the delivery, SPF, DKIM, DMARC.
Mm-hmm.
But again, any control can be spoofed and or bypassed. Even though it's not easy, that's something that that can be circumvented. I think, a couple of years ago we ran into a email security solution, which I won't name, that worked fairly well, and it was AI based. And the whole concept was that it could sit alongside, in front, or behind Exchange or wherever your email delivery service is. And it actually reads the metadata within your email system and builds personas and then conversations between personas to be able to gauge what is typical for communications between people. And then if something looked out of whack, it would flag it and not deliver it. And then you, as the admin, you could go in and say, oh, this is real, deliver it. Oh yeah, this looks bad, let's not deliver that. The one nuance with that, though, was because it read the metadata, the emails would technically still be delivered into the person's inbox, and then they would be removed. Yeah. Now, to an typical end user, you don't see it because you get so many damn emails anyway. But that was kind of a nuance that we ran into a couple times where, you had a few people that were diligent about getting through their inbox, and they're like, hey, how come emails are disappearing? It's like, oh, that's just the supercomputer protecting you from bad people.
Right. Yeah. If I remember correctly, the processing time on an email that was malicious, because we were able to send a couple tests that, like, specifically you could send an email that it would guaranteed remove from the inbox as if it were malicious, even though it wasn't. And if I remember correctly, the processing time was between 10 and 15 seconds. So it was not in the user's inbox for very long. But if they were Johnny on the spot, then they could absolutely, especially we found it with people that had the toast notifications on in Outlook. They'd click on the message, and not only were they the fastest users to open messages, but they were also really confused because the message would be open, and then when it was deleted from their inbox, the separate window that had opened in Outlook would just close. And
Yep.
that generated a few help desk calls until people were like, oh, this is normal. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah. That's a good point, though. If people are clicking on the toast messages, aren't they fundamentally opening a message anyway? So
They are.
Maybe don't have that. Jeez.
Honestly, I don't know why Microsoft made the decision at some point, and it was all the way back in Office XP that they introduced those
Yeah.
notifications out of Outlook. But I don't know why they made the bizarre decision to treat emails as if they were instant messages, because that's not how email ever was before. And now, every now and again, you get somebody whose behavior was only enabled by this kind of technology who will send you an email and then call you like 30 to 45 seconds later and say, did you get my email?
Why didn't you just call me to begin with?
Right, yeah. If we were destined to have this conversation anyway, then why couldn't we have just started there?
That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down, is today's use of email, why it's not right.
Yeah. One of my best friends and mentors in the technology space, as well as kind of unofficially in terms of productivity, time management, used to give seminars that all employees were welcome to attend on those topics, both how to use the technology to effectively manage your time and how to avoid giving your time and attention away in ways that you didn't necessarily need to. And one of the things I will always remember him saying is there is no such thing as an urgent email. And I hold fast to that idea. And I've brought it with me to other groups of people that I've worked with, both as like an idea that I hold on to deep in my heart, and also an idea when it comes to like SOC alerts. Like, oh, well, an email will come through about this. That's not enough. I'm not going to check my email at 1:00 in the morning. If this is bad enough that it's causing an alert, it needs to, at the very least, cause a phone to ring.
Mm-hmm.
We have the technology. Make it happen.
That's why we don't get emails for the tornado warning system.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Although most of us in the Midwest, other than the time well, actually, there probably were people on their porch during the derecho.
I'm sure.
We go out and, crack a cold one and watch the tornado go by.
Yeah.
Oh, look.
Here in the
right
Denver
in my
area, we
backyard.
go to our basement.
Yeah. I still hold that internally from when I lived in the Denver area, and I get some looks from people now that I live in Iowa. Like those sirens start going off, I start looking for cover, and people are like, nah, it's not that bad yet. Just keep an eye on the sky. If you see it coming, maybe think about doing something. I'm like, no, you can't do that.
I mean, the wall cloud's just right across the street. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're okay.
My understanding is that at the place we all used to work together when the derecho hit, for anybody that doesn't live in Iowa, there was a massive derecho that hit Iowa in August of 2020, caused a lot of damage, water, power, a lot of things were down for a couple of weeks. So this was basically an inland hurricane. It swept all the way from Des Moines pretty much to the eastern border of Iowa. And my understanding is that there were people standing next to the giant plate glass windows in our office watching the cars just kind of lift up onto two wheels and taking video instead of moving to the storm shelters. It's like, oh, would you look at that? Never seen anything like that before. Meanwhile, like electrical poles are falling down in the streets, trees are being uprooted, cows are blowing away.
Yeah, that's a mess.
Yeah.
So back to
what
phishing.
What were we talking about? Oh, right. Phishing, yeah. So email filtering, absolutely a must. Everywhere I've worked has had special levels of filtering for anybody that sends an email purporting to be from anybody on the executive suite. So it doesn't matter what the address is, whether it's a Gmail address or anything. If the from name is an exact match for the CEO, the CFO, what have you, that goes into a special hold queue, and it has to be released by an administrator who has to human review it if it didn't come from their own internal address, to try to mitigate the number of gift card scams, that sort of thing.
I think a good thing to call out here is that an admin is reviewing that email. I think
Yes.
in the past we've seen companies who delegate that privilege to unquarantine an email to the end user. And they don't always know how to investigate, headers in an email and see if they're legit or not. So in those cases, you're hoping that your least privilege is enforced throughout the company to protect yourself from what might happen if they unquarantine that email, click on it, enter their credentials, etc.
Yeah. And I guess maybe this last one, maybe this is training adjacent. So you guys let me know if you think this is cheating for an answer to the topic. But the email banner that we put on the top of messages that says this message came from an external source, so that if a message comes up not from the C-suite, those we said are already getting held and reviewed by an administrator, but a message comes in from my colleague 2 desks down, except no, it didn't. It came from an Outlook.com address or a Gmail address. It's just one opportunity to throw up a yellow flag and say, maybe double check and make sure this is actually from who you think it's from. But now that we're getting to the point that we're relying on the end user to notice things, like I said, maybe that's training adjacent, so it might not qualify for this particular topic. I don't know. What do you all think?
It's relevant. It's almost one of those things where it's not as effective as maybe it would have been when it first became a thing to do.
I'd be interested. I think the problem with that banner is it's the same banner every single time. I'd be interested in a system that has like a pool of 15 different ways it can phrase the same message and just randomly picks one every single time. Just so that users don't get to the point that it's like, yeah, whatever's in the yellow box I need to scroll past in order to get to the message I want to read.
Sure.
Yeah, kind of prevent them from becoming complacent.
Yeah.
I think my pause with it too is just the technology's changed, and even going back to clicking on the toast, and that when you click that, you're fundamentally opening the email. Most email clients, you're opening it to read the preview. So by the time you see that banner, it's already open.
True.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the piece of good news, the flip side of that same coin, is email clients have gotten significantly better at not just executing whatever they find in an email and just hoping for the best. Like, I can't remember the last time I specifically heard of a vulnerability that could be exploited simply by having loaded the email itself without downloading an attachment, clicking on a link, or taking some other action. Like, I'm going to put like a bunch of asterisks after that statement, because otherwise somebody 15 years from now is going to go to their technology department and say, I was listening to this podcast and this Alex Gallegos guy, who's a systems administrator, said it's safe to open emails, and that I am not willing to put that blanket statement out into the world. But it's certainly gotten to the point where it is much more likely that you need to open an email and also mess up something else in order to be pwned. Are we saying pwned again?
I think so.
Great.
I would have to dive a little deeper on email security, but I believe that you can just click on the email and that will create some sort of engagement there. even without clicking on the link and entering credentials, etc., or downloading a file.
Yeah, definitely engagement for sure.
Yes.
Like they'll be able to see that you opened the message if they're using any kind of tracking, same as all the marketers can. Yeah.
So if you look at, the whole idea about simulated phishing and proactive phishing, the metric you're after as far as keeping it as low as possible is click rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we define click rate as it's not opening the message only, it's engaging in the activity that the email is trying to get you to do,
Mm-hmm.
which typically is clicking on a link or opening a file.
Mm-hmm.
So my pause with simulated phishing as the thing is I don't feel like it's genuinely changing behavior. And the reason I say that is if you look at the newly minted Verizon breach report, the CrowdStrike threat report, and then even the FBI's report, phishing is still the number one attack vector. And it has been for how many years?
Yeah.
And the percentage might have changed, but it's still always the top vector. So we're not changing behavior by doing what we're doing as an industry.
Sure.
Is it still good? Sure. It's better than nothing, but it's not changing behavior. And I bring this up because I was at a luncheon last week, and I won't name names or who was there. But one of the stories that was told was one of the guys that was there was like, I get really sick of the technologists blaming the end users as the problem. He goes, I worked at a company who the owner was a PhD, and he was notorious for going to conferences and coming back and writing pages upon pages of notes from memory that were all conversations he had over the last 2-3 days. Obviously, the guy's not stupid. Yet the IT team continually threw him under the bus because he was a clicker. It's like, it's not his fault. The attackers are getting better. It's very hard to see what's fake and what's real. And as a technologist or the cyber resources, it's really our job to figure out how you protect people like that. Say, hey, you clicked, just report it. We'll put you through some training so you get better, but we have to figure out how we protect them from themselves.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll admit, I was one of those people that clicked on a link.
I did.
It sucked.
2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, shit. Well, here's 20 minutes of training.
Yep. But they're getting really good. Like, even people who are in the industry can get tripped up by it.
Yeah. Yep. I remember one, it wasn't a simulated phish. I remember getting one to my personal email that I had to double check with the people around me that looked really, really authentic. Seemed to be from Blizzard, the video game company. That was like really good graphic design, this really well-designed marketing email, consistent with their brand, no spelling mistakes, no anything, and with brand new artwork that hadn't really existed anywhere, saying, hey, sign up for the beta for the expansion pack that releases in I think it was like 3 or 4 months, and give us feedback. You're one of the users that's been selected. And I was like that close to clicking on it. It's just like, that seems pretty legit. Because I'm used to phishing emails that look like they were assembled by Timmy as his art school project in kindergarten, and this was like really, really legit. And I assembled like my own little war room of my nerd friends that I was hanging out with, was like, what do you guys think? And so ultimately we decided not to click on it.
At that point?
No, this was like 2009. So yeah. Yeah, back when you had to fend for yourself.
Back when you had to be creative and spell check.
Right.
And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, nowadays I would definitely not trust any artwork. It's like, oh, it's all fake.
Especially Jabba as Leia.
Yeah, oh no, don't bring it up again. Don't. I was thinking of other stuff.
No, this was really my experiment in trying to figure out, okay, it's an image creation tool. It should be super straightforward. Oops.
I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I'm sure what you generated is somebody's fetish. There, I said it. It's out there. It's out there in the world. That's what was in my brain, and maybe I can relieve some mental pressure now. Yeah, exactly. And hey, if you're listening and that's you, minimal amounts of shame to you. Okay, like very
no shame.
We got to bring this back before we go down that rabbit hole too far.
Yeah.
So phishing. My major take on that is I'm quickly trying to get us back.
Right.
Is actually I had happy hour tonight with some coworkers and I was talking to a retired professor, and he said his mom is in her late 80s and he's just super worried about her because I guess at one point they had a landline and someone called pretending to be the Social Security Administration and asked her for her SSN, and she did not give it to them, thankfully, and the next day they shut down their landline. I said, well, that's a good move. And he goes, I feel really bad because they get these calls and all it takes is one misstep and you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to, and then all of a sudden your whole life has changed. And it's disgusting what these people will go to take advantage of people. And I think training and building awareness is great, but I just think there's those of us that are practitioners have to try to figure out how we can protect people because they're going to still make mistakes.
I agree. Yes.
And another one was that another scenario was that someone was retiring and their HR team got a phone call asking to change the routing for this person's check. It wasn't the person. It was someone else.
Yeah.
HR called him and said, hey, so-and-so, are you wanting to change? He said, no. So as he was telling me about it, I said, they shouldn't have even have contacted you unless it was just like a final double check to, because they should know. I mean, if you're going to change routing, it needs to be the person, not some other person asking on your behalf. That just seems fishy to me if someone was trying to do that.
I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. On the one hand, I mean, I get what you're saying from an ideal standpoint. It's like, yeah, absolutely. They should have known better. And I can support that 100%. On the other hand, if you go to my cybersecurity training that I give to my employees, that's my very first step that I give people we go through the hallmarks of what a phishing message is and how you can spot it. Check the email address, make sure it comes from the right email address, make sure the address isn't misspelled, check the links, check the 27 red flags that we all know to look for. But I tell people right away that it's like, so you can either look for all of those things, and you should know how to look for those things. I'm not telling you don't need to know what they are, but you can short circuit that entire process if you get an email that purports to be from somebody asking you to take an action, and you pick up the phone, dial them at a number that you know is their number, and say, hey, Paul, did you send me this message and ask me to do this thing? And if they say, no, I didn't, then you don't have to check any of those other things, and you don't have to worry about whether you got it right or not, because you got the answer straight from the horse's mouth. And so that's kind of what I encourage my end users to do where possible, because ultimately when myself and the head of cybersecurity at my current company designed our training that we gave in October of 2023 for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the takeaway that we gave people, kind of the core main idea before we went into all the details, was there's two ways we can approach this training. Either we can approach it so that you're really good at knowing a bunch of terms about cybersecurity that you probably won't use again in your everyday life, and you're really good at identifying cybersecurity incidents, or suspicious messages, rather. Or, alternatively, there's a second approach, which is the approach we're going to take, which is you're really good at identifying when something seems suspicious or out of the ordinary, and then you're really good at knowing how to behave in that circumstance. And the answer for how to behave in that circumstance is typically always the same. It's 1, verify with a trusted source whether the information that you've received is accurate or not, and then report it to somebody in a position of authority to do something about it. And that was kind of the approach that we took. So while I understand what you're saying, that's like there should be a procedure in place and it never really should have been a question, I'm on board 100%. Pick up the phone, call the user, did you do this? If the answer is no, great. Process over.
Yeah, I think it's some of the context is missing because I'm talking about it third hand.
Sure.
And the way that it was presented to me almost seemed like they were calling him to verify it was okay.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Hey, we're doing this. It wasn't like, hey, did you request this? And I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm losing support then. Okay.
No. That's not right.
Yeah.
By the way,
okay.
we made this change. Are you good with it? Excuse me, you did what? Do you enjoy your job?
Okay, my support is waning in that case. The last thing I would say in kind of the whole email lifecycle is making sure that you, your IT department, your security department are approachable, that you treat your end users with respect, that you don't take an opportunity when something's reported to you to shit on the users for not being perfect. Like, you don't know how to do their job, right? For the most part, that's why you're in your role and your department, and they're in their role and they're in theirs. Like, if you can't make the marketing material, do all the cold calls, make the sales, drive the revenue to the company, fill out the payroll sheets, do everything else that other people in other parts of the organization do, then kind of stay in your lane, I would say, and remember that everybody's working together in order to make the company a success, for the most part. And the worst thing that you can do is have a hostile, combative relationship with the end users. Because if you do that, then people will go out of their way not to report issues in the future. They'll do everything they can not to come to you the next time because they got their head bitten off the last time they brought you an issue. And if that's the case, then you're not going to have the level of rapport that you need in order to have people feel comfortable to pick up the phone and either say, something seemed suspicious, or, even worse, I clicked on a link I shouldn't have, I need help.
Yep. Reporting it, again, making that team approachable, kindness, compassion, and empathy go a long way.
Yeah,
it just needs to
absolutely
be standard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually good parenting advice too, where, in a way you to be a good parent, you don't want to be your kid's friend, per se, but you really do need to be approachable and make sure that they understand, okay, you can come to me with anything legitimately,
Mm-hmm.
And you just need to be able to maybe curtail a reaction until the initial delivery is over, and then maybe you go take a timeout.
Right.
If it's something bad.
Yeah. And Paul, I think you are in a position to personally attest to how much personal growth that advice that I just gave showed. Because I don't know if you remember a time that I called you up and I said, hey, I want you to fire X. And then I named the name of a user and then proceeded to list off the thing that this person had done. And said, so how soon can this person not be an employee of the company anymore? And then you said, so that's not how we do things.
Right. But I think that we also managed to have a good working relationship with a good majority of the people to where we probably could have said, okay, you're fired, go get your box.
Uh-huh.
And then immediately say, okay, just kidding, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
How are we not going to do this again?
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, as always around here, we like to see if anybody has seen anything good lately, any media recommendations, what have you been up to in your spare time? Because, hey, sometimes topics get a little heavy around here, and we always like to end on a lighter note. So, anybody seen anything exciting, wonderful? What are you doing with your spare time?
Apparently nothing.
I'm trying to track down this name of this comedian that I recently saw this week.
Oh.
Derrick Stroup. He actually lives here in Denver.
Nice.
Look him up on YouTube. Absolutely hilarious. But outside of watching comedians on YouTube, I'm just watching security news.
Nice.
So we finished The Staircase finally, and I'd say the last couple episodes are kind of like meh, but it's still worth watching. It's one of those where it's like I said before, you watch this poor woman die 5 different ways, and I felt for the actress. Like, you're covered in corn syrup because that's typically what they use for fake blood, and it's like, ugh.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Maybe they have modern blood they mix up, but I've heard it because corn syrup has kind of that blood consistency, and they can make it look red in post. So
that makes more sense. I just assumed they used pig blood or something.
Yeah, PETA would love that.
Yeah. Have you ever said something and as it's leaving your mouth, you're like, I bet that's wrong.
Every day.
Oh, fair.
Remember, I've been married for over 20 years. There are
right.
It's just still not trained. You're like, oh, well, yeah, I got to go to the grocery store. Goodbye. I think I need gas. We are about 1.5 seasons into Glow on Netflix. Glow is the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. It is not a documentary. It is a comedy based on the 80s, and the whole premise is these guys decide to create a women's wrestling TV show. And it is everything you think it would be. And my wife cackles because there's just scenes where it's like, okay, that just happened. It's awesome.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, and it's the main guy who's the director. He feels very much like a 70s 80s porn star director. That's how he comes off. And so
Mark
it's just
Maron, isn't it, that plays that role?
Sure. I guess. Now we're going to the Google.
I haven't even seen the show. I just remember it was on my recommended list a while ago, and I was going to pick it up, and then I don't remember why I didn't ever get around to it, but I forgot about it until now.
Yes, it is Mark.
Nice. Yep. I love him. I love his podcast.
He's hilarious. He does such a good job. And I guess it's the age I'm at now where I get real nostalgic when they put things in the 80s, and it's like, yep, I remember those pants. I think I had that jacket. Oh, that's my boombox.
Awesome.
Why is she wearing my shoes? I mean,
perfect. I love it.
What about you, Alex?
I've been playing a lot of Helldivers 2 lately.
Ooh.
Otherwise, I saw Dune 2 finally. Did I talk about that last week? I didn't think so. Yeah, I was late to the party. Honestly, I thought I had missed the theatrical run, but then it was like, oh shoot, it's still around. Good. And I finally went to see it during like one of the very last showings. And by the time you hear this, by the time it's edited and actually releases, it almost certainly will be too late to catch a theatrical showing, but maybe in the second run theater. And you should absolutely go see it, because I still thought it was really, really good. It's amazing. Like if you saw Dune, the one that they did in, was it late 70s or early 80s? I can't remember. But if you saw that version, it's amazing how much more breathing room the story has. Oh. Like the first movie from the new one a couple of years ago was almost shot for shot the same as the movie from the 80s. And then like the last 20 minutes of the movie from the 80s is just like, we just got to burn through what ended up being the entire second movie. And so what went from being a breakneck pace of, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and final confrontation, becomes like an entire 2+ hour movie, and it deserves the extra space in order to tell that story. So I thought it was really good. And yeah, that's my super unique and hot take is Dune, the beloved sci-fi classic property that everybody has loved for decades, is pretty good. And you should check it out.
That reminds me, I heard that Jeff Bridges is confirmed for the new Tron.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he's signed on. Yep.
So I learned two things just now. One, that Jeff Bridges is confirmed for the new Tron, and also that there's going to be a new Tron. So I missed that.
Yeah, Tron 3 comes out next year, and it's Tron Ares.
Ooh.
Yeah. Nice. Hopefully Daft Punk makes another. But the cast for that one is Jared Leto, Cameron Monaghan, Evan Peters, Sarah Desjardins. English is hard. Gillian Anderson. Pretty good cast.
Nice.
As of right now, it's October 25. So those two movies are great.
Very cool.
Okay. Alex is going to own the outro now.
All right. Oh, yeah. All of us have gone. That's right. Cool. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us for yet another episode. We appreciate you joining us, as always. We'll catch you in a couple of weeks. And remember, most importantly, balance is key. Otherwise, fall on your ass. The F-It Bucket is hosted by Ashley Keski, Paul Ruffalo, and me, Alex Gallegos. We're edited and mixed by Alex Gallegos. Our theme song is Limit 70 by Kevin MacLeod. If you've been listening to us for the last few episodes, then hey, first of all, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And second of all, you probably already know what I'm about to ask you to do, right? We'd love to hear what you think about the show, what you love, what you hate. So whether you're our number one fans or our number one nemesis, you can always reach out and let us know. If you want to leave us a review on Apple or on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, that would be great. And if you have a unique viewpoint that you want to share, then you can send that to our email address, or you can hit us up on social media. Just don't say anything about how nasally my voice is, okay? I already know, and it's something I'm sensitive about, and I'd appreciate you not bringing it up again, all right? Especially not you, Tony. You know who you are. Now, if you want to engage with us, you can find us on social media. We're on X. No, screw it. We're on Twitter. We're on Twitter. It always has been Twitter, and it always will be on Twitter. Yeah, that's the way it is. We're on Twitter at the F It Bucket. That's EFF. Our subreddit is r/the F It Bucket, and you can email us directly at theeffitbucket@gmail.com. Whew, I really am on fire tonight. Our next episode comes out on May 23rd, and we hope that you'll be here with us. But until then, these 3 enthusiastic amateurs with a microphone and a dream are signing off.
I think we beat that horse to death.
Yeah, probably.
So my disclaimer, I'm muted from Discord, but I did burp in the mic, so you're going to get that in the audio.
That's amazing.
I did that and I was like, oh, that recorded.
Nice. I'll be listening for it.
Yeah.
You're
That'll
like,
be
damn
fun
it,
on
I
the
muted
edit.
the wrong thing.
And I found my mute button now, so there we go. Like, I guess it makes sense to mute the mic and not just Discord. So
Yeah, that'd probably be for the best.
computers, these are fun.
Maybe I'll find that and I'll put it right here because this is obviously going to be the stinger after the credits.
The transition. I have it.
Yeah, and so maybe I'll if I find it, maybe I'll put it right here.